So you do wear so many hats on this film. As far as just wanting to tell something so gripping and so, I think, in your face in a good way. Where did this idea come from? Where did this germinate?
Yeah, so I direct a lot of social media commercials, and there's so many techniques that they use to grab your interest, right? You're like scrolling through Instagram and you're like, oh, I want to look at that. And one day I was shooting one of them and I thought it would be really cool to use all those techniques, but to actually tell something important with the story and not to like sell brand names to Gen Zers, I don't know. So it just kind of came to me of how to hack birth control, because I feel like it's so important to get the message out there to women of how they can get it cheaply, affordably. And in conjunction with that, around the same time, I had a friend who ended up having to get an abortion because she didn't know she had other options. Like, she was on the patch, and long story short, she went off the pill and ended up getting pregnant in an abusive relationship, had to get an abortion. And when she told me about it afterwards, I told her, you can get the pill for free and affordably at Planned Parenthood or different ways. And she had no idea. And that was something that was kind of shocking to me, because she was very smart. She's maybe 10 years younger than me. And I thought, there must be so many other people out there like her who just don't know really how accessible birth control actually is. And I also like making people laugh. So all three of those together.
As far as the narrator character, as that, the way she approaches things, as a matter of fact as it is, how important was it to make this type of film, to have this voice, as you're just pointing out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that it's incredibly important. I've been making movies now for 15 years, and one of the things that I heard a lot, especially when I first got started, was no one wants to watch that because it's about a woman. That, I don't know why, but that was said very frequently to me. And, I kept writing women protagonists in my projects, and what I really wanted to do is have a kind and compassionate narrator who is also very charming and sort of, I know she's a woman, but in a way like genderless, like, she's someone that everyone would be comfortable like being escorted through a burning building with, like she would lead the way and make a joke at the same time or something like that. And I just think that it is very important. And another thing too is I grew up around the news, and I love satire like Samantha Bee, John Oliver, those types of things. And I sometimes think that, especially today in such a heated political divided climate that we live in America and kind of around the world, one of the best ways to get to people is not to yell at them, but to like make them think with a laugh, right? Because that's so many people, you put a guard up when you start spouting off your beliefs, but if you kind of like do a little jab with it, and they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way before, So I really think too that women should feel okay with having sex. We all are here in modern society, and so much shame is brought on women for just wanting to be themselves. And that's the most important message of How to Hack Birth Control for me. Isn't just about the birth control, which it obviously is the whole thing, but telling women that it's okay to be yourself, whoever that person is, in whatever scenario you find yourself in. If you want to date like this, do that. If you don't want to date like this, do that. And just, no one should ever make you feel bad about how you want to live your life as a modern woman. So that's the message.
It's a great message, and it comes across. I'm curious. I really love the animation in your film. Tell me about what that was like, bringing that into it, how much fun that brought to it, and also how that makes it come across. It's like giving children a flavored type of medicine rather than just the medicine. Totally.
My VFX artist is my friend named Sam Clevenger, is a colleague. We've been working together for about 5 years now on all sorts of different projects. And I knew from the beginning I really wanted to go crazy with animation with this. And I said to him, like, when I started writing the script, I was like, okay, there's a game show sequence, there's a flying eagle, there's probably a lot more. Are you down? And he just said, yes. Like, I was like, okay, are you sure? He's like, yes, I want to try anything and everything. And so some of the stuff in there too were like things that he actually wanted to just like mess around with and figure out. Like, there's the uterus cowboy that comes out. That is so funny to me. And we have the great graphic designer. Her name is Arlene Lefebvre, and she was such a trooper, because I would email her and be like, I need curtains that look like uteruses. I need a diploma. I don't know, like the eagle flying in 40 different positions, and she went out and did everything, and she said it was the most challenging job she's ever done, which is great. I mean, it was over a period of a year, right, that we were working on this, kind of from when we shot, or maybe it was like 9 months, but Sam and I partnered up and ended up, my fiance, who also co-produced it, we had like a assembly line of VFX where basically like Arlene would create the graphics, Sam would do the initial animation, I would touch up the key and any other touching up that needs to happen, and then Vince would export it on his computer and proof it. And so it was like, that was all, remote, and then he and I have computers right next to each other, and we'd kind of just like pump through this line of a crazy amount of graphics. Like the game show sequence, instead of titling it by like, VFX1, whatever, we broke it down by shot. So it was like GS_01 was shot 1, and there's 230 shots or something like that, insane. And so that assembly line, we did the game show almost last, and I was so thankful we did, because we had kind of perfected the algorithm of how to pump out these graphics as quickly as possible.
What made you turn it format-wise into something more episodic and not just a regular short film to have its own life? But obviously you can reinvent this, you can come back to it, you can change it, manipulate it with so many different options now.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's kind of a lot of answer to that question. I love documentaries. I watch PBS religiously, and I watch so many of their science and nature and everything documentaries. And so seeing that, I was like, this is in a way kind of like that, but it's all satire and fiction, of like following the thread of proving the point of the story, which in itself is also a film, right? And so I kind of wanted something incredibly different, but yet it's coming out in so many shows currently that exist today. Like on Netflix, they have all of those types of shows. I saw there's a bunch of cooking shows that are also kind of doing this, where they have like a satire sketch and then back to like instructions and stuff. And so I feel like it's kind of this emerging new way of storytelling that is influenced heavily by TikTok and social media and the absurdity of today. And so I kind of wanted to, again, like back to the social media commercials, take all of these new ideas and package it in a way that people who are used to, I guess, normal film aesthetic, I don't know what the word is, the usual 3-act structure, would also be interested in sitting down and watching, and not just being like, oh, this is a silly sketch or something like that. People might take it a bit more seriously if they're like, oh, this is a TV pilot. Because I think the beauty of Birth Control is, like you said, it could be split up into different episodes. We're trying to pitch it right now. My management team is trying to sell the series, a How to Hack series on women's rights. And so that would be great. I mean, the timeliness of this is kind of insane because I definitely wasn't expecting everything that's going on with women's rights to be happening right now as we speak. And so hopefully, we can sell it and get this information out there to people as quickly as possible, because I feel, unfortunately, women are going to need to know way more about birth control very quickly in the very immediate future, probably within the next 2 weeks.
We came from Texas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We live it.
There you go.
please do this as quick as possible.
Yeah.
To talk about your writing, first of all, quite honestly, the funniest "That's What She Said" line I've ever heard in my life.
Thank you. I love that line.
Did you just write this in a vacuum by yourself? I mean, where the hell does this come from? There's a lot of topical jokes. There's obviously a lot of twisting of the jokes. How much fun was it just to do this? It
was so much fun to write. I mean, I have this sort of humor where I make fun of every situation in my head. Like when we were coming here and my brand new shorts broke as we were walking out the door, and I was just like cracking jokes. I was like, this is very stressful, but let's enjoy this, and have a laugh. And so it's like, I kind of view everything within reason of, like, if we're not here to enjoy what's happening around us, then why are we here? Like, what's the point of existing if we're not going to have fun in even the worst situations if possible? And I kind of throughout my life have been in like situations when I was dating and like someone would say something and I didn't want to say it, but in my head I'm like pocketing that. Like the rent joke is something that, like, one time a guy was trying to pressure me not to use a condom, and I just in my head had this whole like rent like line about it that I saved and used in this project. When I was writing it, I would come up with this, the script, and Vince, my fiance, and I would read it to him and gauge his laughter, and then he would occasionally, throw in like, what if they did this? And I was like, that's a great idea. And then what if we did this? And started like bouncing those ideas back and forth. And that's so invaluable to have someone you trust who also has a good sense of humor, that so like you're not writing in a vacuum and like, this is hysterical to yourself, because like you can't know if it's hysterical unless someone else actually laughs at the joke. So, I mean, he was great, and it was really fun. I just literally just sat down for 2 weeks, and every day I was like, okay, we're writing a sketch about condoms. Now I'm going to write a sketch about this and that, and just went through all the things of birth control. I was like, how can I make this concept funny? The game show thing was so fun to write too, and watched a lot of game shows for that, which I don't normally do.
Did you have to proof over some of the material just to make sure if someone vets this movie, like you're completely correct, which I've seen it, I think it is, but I'm just curious, was there ever that fear?
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in DC, and there's a lot of just like proofing everything you do before you say it publicly, and I kind of have just been used to that. And so when I was researching it, the first thing I did was go through, and I went on, I think like the Planned Parenthood website, and they have a whole page of every single different type of birth control. Some of them I hadn't even heard of before, and I picked the ones that are used, like they're like 60% or, like the most common ones. And then I went and found on websites like Planned Parenthood or other websites that are official, not like some random blog somewhere. They're like, okay, here are the possible side effects of X, Y, and Z. Here are the statistics. And so I put those in like an outline, and then I took that information and made the jokes from it. So it came from a place of actual content, like information, as opposed to having the joke and then filling it in with the information. Because I think that works better too, because you're not trying to like force something either way,
What did it mean to you to know that you were going to be accepted into Bentonville, knowing what Bentonville is, knowing what Gina and her foundation are trying to do? How cool is it to be at this festival?
I have to say, it is very cool to be at Bentonville. I don't even say that to the camera. It's very cool to be at Bentonville. It was my #1 festival out of all the festivals that we have applied to that I really wanted to get into because of everything you just said, how important it is for women, female filmmakers and minority filmmakers, and just stories, untold stories that are so important and engaging, which is the crazy thing to me when people would say no one's going to watch that because it's about a woman, and I'm like, well, 51% of the population is a woman, so I feel like they would disagree with you, and so I'm just so honored to be part of this festival and to be included with such other brilliant works. I didn't get a chance to look at as many of them before we came, but we were just looking at all the stuff here, and I was like buying like getting the tickets for all of them, because like, oh my god, I want to see all of these movies, and it's so great to just be part of hopefully a bigger movement to get those stories that aren't told as much out there, because there's definitely an audience for all of these films, and I'm so happy that Hollywood, to a degree, is warming up to that proposition and is interested in the films that are being shown here today.
What do you watch? What are your things to go to? I know you said PBS, but I'm just curious, like, how's your mind work when it comes to your entertainment?
That's a good question. Let's see. Right now, I'm rewatching Friday Night Lights for maybe the millionth time.
Is that just because we're from Texas? You're saying that?
No, I love Friday Night Lights. I love the filmmaking aspect, like The White Lotus. That was my favorite thing that came out in 2021. Speaking of Connie Britton, and I love that type of like the improv style that Friday Night Lights has, White Lotus has, where you can tell the actors are having a lot of fun with these characters. And like with birth control, with so many of the actors too, we'd have a joke written and then they'd add like a little sort of cherry on it. And I'm like, that's the stuff that I love working with and watching. And I feel like in so many films and TV shows, you can see when that's sort of occurring. Like I know Mad Men was so structured, but you can tell those actors are having a blast doing all that crazy 60s nonsense that they're doing. So that's one of my favorite shows. And I mean, I will literally watch anything that someone's like, you should check this out. I think 2020, my favorite thing was Bo Burnham's Inside. I don't know if, did you see that one? So funny. That's what I mean, is that sort of satire comedy based in a truth that exists everywhere, like inside White Lotus. In a way, Friday Night Lights is a drama, but it's based in such true emotion and feeling of trying to be your best self. Those are the stories I love watching.
Very cool. How much did this process, this project, change you as a writer, as a director, as an editor? Got you to do everything on this film.
Well, I could say the editing, it taught me a lot. I do freelance writing, directing, producing, and editing, and you start to get in like a rhythm of stuff, and not that you've ever learned everything, but I was like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. And then you open, you're like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing, And so you just, with the game show, like sat back and just sort of, I took it in chunks, like very small, like 5-shot chunks, and then pieced 10 shots again, and you start to learn how to do that type of editing. And then as a writer and director, knowing you will edit, it changes everything in a very cool way, because I'm able to be like, when we get a shot and say the actor messed up a line in the beginning and the end, but I know the moment of this take I'm gonna use, I'm like, nope, we can move on, because I know exactly what I'm gonna cut to. So it's such a time saver. Birth Control taught me so much. We shot it during the pandemic, so there's a whole learning experience there before vaccines, and it taught me a lot about working with a very diverse pool of actors in terms of their themselves, but also where they are in their careers, and like how to handle working with bigger actors versus smaller actors. And it was really just sort of, the whole project was a graduation for myself into like a bigger realm of filmmaking, and it was great because, it was a learning experience where, like, knock on wood, nothing went wrong. There's still time left though, so.
Well, now that you're in that space, is there anything you can share with ideas, stories that you're looking to get out there? Obviously, I think there is life for this that you guys already know about and are looking into, but what about your other writing projects, your other ideas? Yeah,
so I'm developing 2 other shows right now with my management team, which is really fun. One is actually a pilot I did a few years ago called Weedland. It takes place in 2015, but it's about the marijuana industry and hypocrisy in government and weed delivery services and being a woman entrepreneur. And then the other one is also about, it's called True Perfection. It's a satire about the idea of what is truly perfect and how social media has changed our entire perspective of how we present ourselves to the world. And, you'll be really perfect if you're just true to who you are and not all the everything else that's out there. And so those are 2 things I'm in the middle of now. I never thought that when I started that I'd be so into making TV, but I love TV today, especially if you have like Mayor of Easttown, White Lotus, a contained movie that it happens to be 10 hours long is amazing. So I'd love to write some more of those.
Very cool. Since you shared with us a really, I think, important story to you earlier on, I'm curious, knowing that your work has a comedic side to it and yet it's talking about very serious material, how do you judge which is too much, which is too little? How do you gauge your writing? Is it comedic? Is it not? How do you look at your own stuff?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that a lot lately, because Birth Control is just a straight up comedy of just, it's the tone that you started all off with is to me, I think, the most important thing. So Birth Control starts with the pretense of a wedding, and then she lifts up her skirt, is wearing a chastity belt, and we cover do you remember when you didn't have sex before marriage? Neither do we. You don't even get to answer the questions. No one does, because that's not what happens today. And then it's okay, end of discussion. Now you know the entire tone of the project, and also the pretense that we're going to be talking about. So if we can understand people have sex, then that's the end of that discussion. Being gay isn't a choice. End of discussion. Move on to the next thing. And so when I do stuff that is more dramatic, I really try and focus on that first scene and then use that almost as my own template to remember this is the tone that I should go to. So if I get too dramatic or too comedic, then I kind of go back to the beginning and okay, what am I trying to say? And also just to be sensitive sensitive to what could be too taboo to make fun of, right? Like that happens all the time now. And so you just have to kind of be aware of what the zeitgeist is, and also just where your humor, how far it goes, because not everyone's going to think everything that you think is funny is funny. And so I just try and be very conscious of the public opinion too, but not to the effect that it actually changes me too much.
I was about to say, you're pushing buttons like crazy.
I do love pushing buttons, that's true.
Well, keep doing it. I was blown away by this. I cracked up the entire time. Like I said, still the funniest That's What She Said joke ever.
Thank you so much.
Lastly, I would just like to know, like, I already asked you what entertainment you like, but as far as like how you present yourself, you're so... I wouldn't have guessed that this is the type of person making this film. You were so infectious. How do you look at life differently?
That is a very complex, interesting question. Thank you for asking that. I feel like I look at life differently. Backing up, I just edited my dad's 75th birthday video, right? And I'm a perfectionist, so it's like, it's better than most people's 75th birthday videos, I would say. But I looked at his life and then my family's life, and how I was born in New York City and raised with like theater and arts there. We moved to DC when I was 5, and then my dad worked at CNN as an audio engineer for 20 years. And I grew up kind of going into work there and with the government, and almost all of my friends I went to high school with work in the government in some fashion. And then, I moved out to California for college right away. And I really feel like having all 3 of those different experiences helps shape me so much, of just like the New York City foundation of kind of like not taking any sass, walking very quickly, being extremely opinionated and always right because you're from New York City. And then you go to DC, and education and literacy and interaction with humans is so important there. That's all people do, is just talk and then one up each other with how smart they are all day long, and then come to LA and it's all, the BS of the film industry in a great way possible, and everyone's watching movies and TV shows and famous and everything in between, and having all 3 of those things combined into one has been very cool for me. And I didn't realize how like unique that was until sort of recently, and to see all of these different sort of ingredients in the soup. And I'm just excited to keep making movies and to keep telling these stories. And really, I just, with all of my films since the beginning, have been to try and reach other women, start off like myself or anywhere, to just be like, you can be yourself and be okay. They don't tell you that really growing up as a kid, at least not a lot of people did for me. And so I just really want to keep making movies that help empower women and people whose stories aren't usually told, to understand that they're just as equal and just as valid to be here as everyone else. So that's basically why I'm here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I implore people to see your film in like my entire state I live in. Thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And my publicist would kill me if I didn't say this. You can go to birthcontrolhacks.com to find out more about it. Thanks, Nadine. And thank you so much.
Perfect.